And hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you with us for another Sunday night show. I guess we're recapping week 3 of the Division II football season. As you see, I'm Brandon Meisner, joined by Chuck, Chris, Devin, Matt, and Justin. And we had a great slate of games, a very exciting weekend. I think, honestly, 2 of the best back-to-back weekends that we've ever had in Division II as far as the excitement goes. But the weekend starts off, and our discussion is going to start with the game of the week. West Florida, the number 1 ranked team in our poll, went to Texas A&M-Commerce, won 35-17. And Matt, why don't you go ahead and recap that one for us?
Yeah, it was an interesting game last evening. You had Commerce get on out early, get a lead, and had West Florida playing chase for the better part of the first half of the game. Commerce is up at halftime, 17-14. Everybody's thinking maybe this is an upset brewing or something like that. Commerce, real good defensive squad, very athletic squad, games at Commerce, everything else. Then in the back half of the contest, the Argonauts just kind of took over, 3 straight scores, end up winning 35-17, which is probably a little more indicative of how things really were when you take a look at the box afterwards. West Florida outgains the Lions by 200 yards. West Florida starts getting to the quarterback quite a bit in the back half of the game, ends up with 5 sacks, while West Florida doesn't have any. Obviously, Austin Reed still looking like a fantastic quarterback. Really, he's going to be once we start getting a little bit further into the year and we start looking at things like who's the Harlan Hill best candidates, his name's going to pop right up. There's no question about it. So I thought it was another really good game for West Florida to be tested. They got a chance to with McNeese. I mean, that's an FCS road test. Then a game like this where you're playing Commerce. I mean, this is they've had some interesting games, I think, already in this year, and they're passing each test and kind of moving ahead, which that makes me on the other half kind of wonder where we go with Commerce.
Well, they are 1-2 now on the season. And I think an interesting talking point, and it's something that I thought of and both Chuck and Matt thought of, at 1-2, should Commerce still be ranked in the poll? I'd like your guys' opinion on that.
I'll go first on that since I threw out the discussion topic. Okay. I probably spent more time than I should have this morning thinking about that, but I did keep them in the poll at number 25. Just looking at the teams that they played, the way they've tested themselves, overcoming some adversity, playing without their starting quarterback. When I looked at some of the teams that were in my first 5 out, I compared them to Commerce and thought, do these teams beat Commerce on a neutral field on any day? Or if they go to Commerce, what are their chances of winning? And I had to go to Commerce in most of those situations. So I did keep them in there. I had some other teams that I really wanted to pull into the top 25, and I also tweeted out a list of a whole bunch of 3-0 teams that are not ranked. I want to throw out some love for them too. But I kept them in.
All right. Do we have a dissenting opinion, Devin? What do you think? Can you hear us, Devin?
I'm with Chuck on that one. I would keep them in the top 25 if I vote in the top. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I would keep them in the top 25. We talked about it last week. I'm not for punishing teams for scheduling tough out-of-conference games and losing those tough games. I'm not for punishing them and dropping them out. I know they lost to Midwestern 2 weeks ago, but Midwestern is also a really good team. So they're 1-2. They're probably the best 1-2 team in the nation. So I would keep them in the top 25 personally with that as well.
Well, then does anybody object, or would anybody not have them as a top 25 team in spite of the fact that they are 1-2 on the year? Okay, well, no worries. I guess we're all in agreement there. That's why we're all part of the same team, I guess. I concur. I think Matt does, and I'm not going to speak for Justin because I don't know, but I believe that they should be part of that. Nonetheless, looking at West Florida, you had talked, Matt, about how it's getting them prepared for the season, but it's like, preparing them for the playoffs. It's preparing them for the Gulf South Conference. They're going to be as prepared as they ever have for the MIAA, for the playoffs, because they faced the Gulf South teams, and they faced Gulf South teams and in the past and made it and won the championship. But with this schedule that they have, they're going to be as sharp as they've ever been, in my opinion.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And I mean, who's to say there's any guarantee getting out of the Gulf South in general? I mean, there's when you take a look at some of the teams that we have ranked, not to mention some of them we don't even have ranked, the Delta states of the world. I mean, you could make a case for maybe they're almost top 25 worthy, given what a tough, group of games they have to play. Certainly.
Sure. We will get to them later. So let's go ahead and transition then, guys. A game that was much closer than I thought it was going to be. Ferris State 47, Saginaw Valley 45 in overtime. I did not expect that to happen. Bowie had come back and beaten Saginaw the week before. But Chuck, Jared Bernhardt did not play in the game, and it turned into a wild, wild game.
Absolutely crazy. I spent a lot of time looking at the tape on that game this morning, reading up on it. If you like uncomfortable, awkward situations, go watch Coach Neese's presser afterwards. I mean, he just looked miserable. Like he was happy that they won, and after every comment that he made, he just said, "But we're 3-0. We're 3-0." He was stunned. I don't think he even had an explanation for how they managed to win the game. So it's pretty remarkable. So just to recap it a little bit, they ended up with 7 turnovers, 5 lost fumbles, which is just incredible. 2 interceptions. Saginaw also had a bunch of turnovers. I think they threw 3 interceptions. All of them were pretty poor interceptions that were thrown. Throughout all of this, they still end up, Ferris, still ends up having a 2-touchdown lead in the second half. Saginaw comes back. They managed to overcome that 2-touchdown deficit. Ferris pulls ahead late in the game. Saginaw ends up with one last gasp, and they come down the field and tie it on the last play of regulation. They scored with 3 seconds left. So then they go into overtime. In the first frame of overtime, it just gets even crazier because Ferris scores. On the PAT, they missed the PAT, but they get roughing the kicker foul. So Coach Neese takes a gamble in this situation and says, if I can take a half a distance to the goal penalty here and punch it in and put the pressure on them to score 8 points in the bottom half of this overtime, I like that situation. So that's what they did. He opted not to go for the re-kick. They go for 2 in the first frames. And remember, you don't have to go for 2 until we get later in overtime. They go for 2, they get it, so they get 8 points on the board. Saginaw actually does score, but then they didn't get the 2-point play. So just a crazy game. I don't think any of us saw that coming. I mean, we know that they have a lot of history together. Saginaw is a talented football team. We know how much Jake likes their uniforms. So they almost pull off an amazing upset on the road. And so I'm sure Chris was just loving this because, Saginaw's out there throwing the ball over the field against the number 2 team in the country. Bowie State's looking at this and saying, hey, we must really have something on defense because we held those guys to 10 points last year. I know some of their coaches saw that and reacted to it. So just a crazy, crazy football game. But at the end of it, Ferris gets the win. And I don't think that they're a team that needs style points. They have a brand. They're ranked in the top 5. It was an ugly, ugly win. But I don't think that they really need the style points. They just need to learn. They need to improve. They need to clean up the turnovers and go on. And I'm sure that they're going to have a really, really tough week of practice. But you have to look at it as hopefully something that they use as a way to improve when they get deeper into the GLIAC schedule this year. But just an incredible game, a crazy game. For football nerds like us, go read through the box score. It is entertaining just to read through the play-by-play in the box. It's just wild.
What's interesting to me, guys, and I want to bring this up real quick. And I just had this thought as we were talking because yet Tony Anise wins yet again with a backup quarterback. And in the years when he had Jason Vanderline and he played every game, they didn't do as well as they have when he's had even backup quarterbacks starting for him. So the guy can obviously coach offensive football and is very good. Sorry to interrupt. Go ahead. Somebody had a thought about that.
Yeah, I had a question because we saw like last week that Saginaw couldn't really move the ball against Bowie, like to drive down the field. So I just kind of wondered those 7 turnovers. Was it Saginaw having short fields?
Yeah, a little bit was Saginaw was able to. They got a pick six. That was part of it. They did get some short fields because of the turnovers that they were able to create, but also their receivers were doing a really good job creating space on Ferris's defense. Something that they really were not able to do against Bowie State, and of course, Bowie has an incredible secondary. They've got some really good ball hawks back there. So they obviously played much better against Saginaw's passing offense than Ferris State was able to.
Chuck, does this make you pause at all with regard to Ferris State? Meaning, are they in that top 3 grouping like we really think that they are, or does this mean that they're susceptible defensively, you think?
Well, it certainly means that they're more vulnerable than we thought they were. I did move them down, I think, a peg or two. I still have them in the top 5, but I think I did put another team or two ahead of them. And of course, there's also the variable of what is their quarterback situation going forward, and we don't know. If Bernhardt comes back, maybe that changes some things. If he doesn't, they have a decision to make because both guys that played, I think they played 2 different players. They made some plays, but a lot of mistakes that they have to clean up as well. So that could be a big challenge for them going forward. What does their quarterback situation look like? So,
sure.
I think it's a game that I look at as does it get my attention in a not so good way for Ferris? Yeah, absolutely. Am I gonna knock them down out of the top 5 or even out of the top 10? No, not yet. But they've got that big Anchor Bone Classic coming up soon with Grand Valley, so we'll know a lot more then.
What's interesting to me is that we're dealing with so many quarterback issues so quickly. And it's also interesting that Jared Bernhardt has we're acting like he's a big loss when he's played 2 games in 5 years. But let's transition to talk about the next game that we wanted to talk about, and it does deal with quarterbacks. Northwest Missouri won 47-7 over Central Missouri, and did so without starting quarterback Braden Wright, who is now expected to be out 6 to 8 weeks because he had an emergency surgery as it was released. But Devin, the Bearcats looked really good on Saturday, as good as they've looked in a long time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, mic is on. Yep. So sophomore quarterback Mike Honesy got his first start, and he looked really good, looked poised in the pocket, and just something the Bearcats have missed since Zimmerman in their national championship run 2016. Really, they haven't had that quarterback that looked comfortable and poised in the pocket to make good throws to really good skill position players they haven't been able to utilize the last few years because of the inconsistency of the quarterback position. But you can see here in the video, he looked really good. Used his legs a couple times. He had 6 total touchdowns. I mean, he looked very good and poised. And if he can play like that versus good teams, I know UCM, they have struggled defensively versus Pitt and Washburn, now versus Northwest, right. And it might just be tail spinning. So I'm kind of hesitant still at that point because I want to know, because even Braden Wright in the past had looked really good against teams who were struggling defensively. So I want to see him do this versus good defenses as well. But it's a good step in the right direction for Northwest. You see Caden Davis had a couple touchdowns there for Northwest as well. And he had 260, 4 touchdowns in the air, 30 yards and 2 on the ground as well. So does this quarterback change? Does it spark the Northwest offense? No, in the past couple of weeks we talked about Northwest. We all knew their defense was really good. Does this offense maybe showing up now and having some pop to it, does that possibly put them with the West Floridas and other teams around the nation as possible favorites for a national title going forward?
Devin, let me ask, what type of difference do you see in skill set between the two signal callers?
I think Honesy's just more accurate, and he looks more comfortable in the pocket. There's sometimes with Wright, he gets happy feet, and it kind of causes some accuracy issues. I didn't see that for Honesy. Also, he didn't get pressured a whole lot by UCM, so maybe that changes if he is under pressure.
Sure.
But that's just what I kind of saw. I think he was more accurate, and just his command of the offense is what I kind of saw as a difference maker. Wright is probably a better scrambler, a little better runner. But the difference isn't enough there for me. I think Honesy is going to take this job and run with it, and I'm not sure Wright ever gets it back even when he's healthy.
Well, the Bearcats obviously had plenty of weapons to work with him as well, whether it's at running back or wide out. I mean, you look at this offense, and when I came on down, and and saw them in the spring play against University of Sioux Falls, I thought to myself, there's no reason that this team can't make a run at the national title. I knew that they could already defend, but they seemed like they had enough weaponry that there really wasn't any reason for them to not be a little bit more prolific than they had been.
Yep, absolutely. That's what a lot of people around Northwest have been talking about last few years, just this offense and just the inconsistency at quarterback, whether it was on Braden or the play caller in the past. They got a new play caller this year,
Sure.
change at quarterback, and now the offense kind of exploded there. And it was just each drive was just getting better and better on offense until they called the dogs off there in the third quarter. And I think it was just refreshing for Northwest a little bit on the offense side, because everyone knew the defense was going to play out and play really well. Just to see the offense move the ball and be more consistent, so not having to grind out 20-7 wins kind of deal. As
Right.
we talked about last week, getting dominant wins in conference and kind of establishing yourselves as the alpha in the conference is important for the national picture going forward.
Right.
Hey, Devin, what are your impressions of McKellar, the running back? I got to see him a little bit at University of Indianapolis. Give me some of your impressions on what you see from him.
Northwest had a lot of good running backs in the past, and since Oman and Council, he's probably the best one I've seen. He might be right there with Council, and they've had some good running backs there with Justin Simmons and James Franklin and Justin Rankins in the past. He's just a really explosive athlete. He runs hard. I'm not sure if Brandon has the clip or not there that I saw someone post to Twitter where he threw a UCM defender down and just looked at him while he was still in the field. It was a very savage move by him, and Northwest was already at 40 at that point, so it kind of embodied the entire game for Northwest. But he's a really fun player, and I think he had a little extra of that game with them losing to UCM last year in the playoffs at UIndy. Him being with a better team now with Northwest and kind of being able to show what he can do a little bit, I think really gave him an extra little spark there in Warrensburg as well. And he's just a really fun player. And so even if Honesy struggles in the future, you still have McKellar to kind of rely on to kind of steady things in the backfield as well.
Well, one thing that nobody's talking about, because I was actually at the game, on the message board, they're talking about how much faster Northwest was than Central. And I thought it was just a matter of Northwest being much more physical than Central. I was seeing bully football being played, and Justin will understand this just conceptually. Whenever you're not dragging people down or even making good form tackles, you're simply throwing people to the ground and shoving them down when you're just a much more manly team than the other team. That was the case I thought yesterday.
Yeah, and I just watched it on the MIAA network, and I thought UCM kind of looked defeated as a team, but I think their broadcast team was even more defeated. Just listened to them the entire game from the opening kickoff. I think the energy around the Central Missouri team is just so low right now, and Northwest just pounced on them from the start, and that's what it looked like to me.
It's tough. Justin will also appreciate this. I've known so many coaches over the years, and they're talking about like jobs that they would take or not take, and the idea was that you always wanted to take a job at a good program because you all are going to work hard and spend all those hours every day, and you might as well do it while you're winning instead of losing. It makes for a much better experience, So.
Definitely. Well, and one other thing about Mike Hohensee, I don't know how many people have put it together, but his dad was a quarterback for the University of Minnesota, went on to a career in the CFL and the NFL, and then was a head coach in the Arena Football League for a long, long time. So I knew that young Mike had gone to Northwest, and so just kind of waiting to see kind of how he did when he had the opportunity to play. I was excited yesterday when I read the box score, or I guess it was last evening, and saw that he had kind of gone off because I know he's been preparing for this pretty much his whole life because of who his dad is. He's been around the game for so long. So I was excited to see that he had such a big game and that they did so well. And I don't think this will be the last time that we're talking about him on this show.
Right.
All right. Well, another interesting game yesterday, or I guess the storyline of Hohensee started was interesting for Northwest and Central, but a very interesting game, and one that I actually thought had a chance to be an upset, and I didn't call it, was one that Chuck was at. And that was Newberry hosting number 5 Lenoir-Rhyne. Newberry coming away with the 28-1 win, and I know that Chuck got to hang out in one of his favorite places to watch a game.
Yeah, it certainly was an interesting game, and I didn't really see it coming because I had seen Newberry the week before against North Greenville, same time, same place, and they just were not very impressive at all. I had thought after we did the show 2 weeks ago, Justin and I talked about this game a little bit. I think he went Newberry. I went North Greenville. And then after thinking about it a little bit more, I thought, no, I'm going to go Newberry. I like their running game. I like their defensive line. I think they can hold up and stop North Greenville and establish the run. And it just didn't happen. They couldn't do anything against North Greenville. They couldn't establish the run. They couldn't push the ball down the field. They were just getting beat at the line of scrimmage. And I thought, if they can't really hold their own against North Greenville when Lenoir-Rhyne comes in, they're just going to be way too explosive, and they're going to do what Lenoir-Rhyne does, which is score early and make Newberry play from behind, and they're just not really going to be able to keep pace. And it didn't work out that way at all. Newberry did everything that they're really good at. They established the run, played very well in the defensive line. They kept Lenoir-Rhyne from hitting plays downfield, and they're really one of the best teams in the country at doing that. They have a beautiful deep ball, and they just really couldn't do it. Bears just could not hit the deep ball, and Newberry just kept pounding at them with the running game. I think the running back, Mario Anderson, averaged 6 yards per carry, and it seemed like every rush was exactly 6 yards, and they just kept hammering them with that. And that opened up the passing game as well. So great performance from Newberry. I hadn't seen them play like that since 2016. They beat Wingate to win the SAC championship on their field. I hadn't seen them play that well since then. So really great performance for them. Lenoir-Rhyne, don't know where they go from here. Obviously, they just go right back to work, but that's a conference loss, so they start the year in conference play 0-1. So, that it's not a long conference schedule. There's not a lot of room for error. So they have to win the rest of their games if they're gonna have a shot at winning the SAC championship.
Let's look at
really, really tough loss for them.
Looking at bigger picture though, Chuck, and I think that Lenoir-Rhyne has probably transitioned to a team that thinks more about the ultimate goal than the SAC championship, although every team has that conference championship as a goal. What do you think this does in terms of their playoff chances looking way ahead when they have to compete with the Gulf South? Because home field advantage would be pretty important when there's so many what appear to be strong Gulf South teams this year.
Well, it is, and Lenoir-Rhyne has a 10-game schedule this year. They weren't able to get an 11th game, so that hurts a little bit. Part of it is going to depend on a couple of things, like where does Newberry's season go from here? If Newberry is a really good team at the end of the year, if they're in the mix, it certainly helps Newberry's credibility, or it helps Lenoir-Rhyne's credibility. If Virginia State goes on and has a great year, that big win that they had up there means a lot. But they only have 4 home games at LR this year. They haven't played at home yet. They only have 4 home games, so there's going to be a lot of pressure. There'll be a lot of pressure on them to perform. A lot of tough games coming up too. So they'll regroup. They're a good team. There's a ton of talent there. Really, I think very highly of the coaching staff. They'll regroup. They'll get it together. But there's a lot of pressure on.
All right. Another. This would be another compared to West Florida, Texas A&M-Commerce. One of the top 25 matchups that we saw. Midwestern State played Angelo State, and Midwestern State won 35-17, and Bill Maskell has the Midwestern State team 3-0 and has things rolling in Wichita Falls.
Yeah, and that one is really interesting because it's a kind of a tale of two halves. The same thing that happened at Commerce happened at Angelo, where Midwestern kind of, they were kind of trying to get going in the first half, and it was second half adjustments that they just started to really get going on offense. Angelo had 319 yards of offense in the first half, and the Midwestern defense shut them down to 140 yards in the second half. And so, it's one of those things that Midwestern starts a little slow but gets going. Pretty strong passing offense, not much of a running game, but it kind of goes back to that era where Midwestern, when they're really successful, a lot of that is through the air, and they were able to truly establish that. I would say some of the best Midwestern teams have been when they can actually run the ball too. But this is a great start to the season for them to knock off two what we thought were going to be, highly ranked and 1 and 2 in the conference, and now they've kind of spoiled the party here.
Well, as somebody who's been following Division II as long as I have, to me, Midwestern State's been one of the best teams in the Lone Star. They had a great team in 2006. They had a great team in 2011. So to me, this feels very comfortable. It's what I was used to. For somebody who might be newer, and Matt's been around for a while now, but he's not been around as long as we have. Midwestern State's probably not somebody that's ever really been on your radar, have they, Matt?
For me, yeah. Actually, in 2017, I think it was. Okay. They beat Commerce when they had Luis Perez, and during the regular season, then they were unbeaten and ended up beating Sioux Falls. Then went to Mankato and kind of got boat race there. But Mankato was doing that to a lot of teams that year, and but they had a squad that was very very good in space. They did a great job of getting their guys the ball in space and very fast and hard. They made the game a track meet against some squads, and that was tough. Yeah.
Well, the Mustangs 3-0, but let's stick with you, Matt. Minnesota Duluth got ranked for the first time that I can remember in a little bit. They had a contest with Winona State, which they won. Are the Bulldogs for real now?
I think I felt a little bit better about who they were a week ago after watching them kind of dismantle Mankato. This last weekend, they end up getting up big early again, being able to spread the ball around the field. Not the Duluth that teams recall of the past, where it's ground and pound and everything like that. They're just not that team anymore. They chuck it around a lot. That all said, they get up 29-3 on Winona at Winona, looking like they're going to beat an unbeaten team who would be a team that would be on the outside of the top 25, but not far away from it. Then all of a sudden they can't put away the Warriors, and Winona starts creeping back into the game, and all of a sudden it's 29-23, and Winona's marching with about 30 seconds left, almost to the red zone, and they just couldn't quite, reach pay dirt at the end. Otherwise, Duluth's in a whole different spot here. So it made me wonder a little bit about how really good Duluth is. I still think they're probably one of the top teams in the Northern Sun. I don't know if there is a true, as mentioned earlier, alpha with Northwest by Devon. I don't really know if there is a true alpha right now in the Northern Sun. I think there's some really good teams, but I don't know if there's that one standout team just yet. Which kind of leads me to, some of the other action that was in the Northern Sun. Mankato ends up, playing a real good second half and outlasting Bemidji in a bit of a shootout. But Mankato started to look a little bit more like a team that was a little more cohesive and started playing better defense, over 500 yards offense, all that kind of stuff. Then, I also had Augustana, who's now 3-0, and heck, I even had All-American Logan Swanson kind of D-tackle, kind of chirping me a little bit, saying, hey, our defense needs to get a little bit of love. We've only had 40 yards of rushing against us through, total through 3 games. And so they're playing real strong as well. I mean, if we're going to be real candid about it, they've played Minot, Mary, and Moorhead, who are not probably 3 of the better teams in the conference. So we'll know a lot more about Augustana in the coming weeks as they continue to climb up the ranks here. They go to Bemidji this weekend, and Bemidji's never an easy place to play. Augustana lost a heartbreaker and probably had left a sour taste in their mouth last time they were up there. And then after that, they play the Key to the City game against University of Sioux Falls. So I think we're going to know a whole lot more about Augustana after 2 more weeks. But I've said it before on this show, I think they're as good or better than anybody in the Northern Sun right now. And that includes Duluth. So we'll have to see.
Matt, I wanted to ask you about Augie because, I know that coming into the season, you felt that they probably should have been a top 25 team. 3-0. Scoring offense and scoring defense are probably among the national leaders. They're off the charts on both.
Right.
So you talked a little bit about what we've seen so far, but kind of looking ahead down the road, and you talked about some of the games that are coming in the next few weeks, but I think when we get into late October, the rubber really meets the road when they've got Duluth, Mankato, and Winona in 3 consecutive weeks. Maybe not in that order, but I think they play those 3 teams in 3 consecutive weeks. Where do you see Augustana possibly being when we get to that point in the season?
It'll be fascinating. I think first of all, if I take a look at these next few games, I'm going to get a chance to see really how good this defense is, in my opinion. Now, they're playing awesome against the run, but Mitchie's going to throw the ball 70 times against them, so that's not going to be a running, test. Sioux Falls is going to try and do ground and pound, so that's going to be a fascinating matchup in that regard. And then as you continue through the season, I think it'll give you a bit of a blueprint of how they would do against a Mankato, for example, who plays a very similar ground and pound style. Winona State don't know enough about who they are just yet, given kind of a topsy-turvy game that they just had, even though they've been off to a real good start. But as you mentioned, Augustana's got a really tough slate here. When you look at those are 5 games, Chuck, for teams that would be top 25-ish kind of opponents. A lot of them right around that 25 to 30 or 40 number, but still very challenging games. And they've got a lot of depth running back and some other spots defensively as well. But they're going to need to continue to get solid quarterback play from Kyle Sadler. He did have 3 picks yesterday, threw 5 touchdowns, but I think they're going to need for him to continue to be very efficient for them not to have to get into firefights like that.
Right. Well, let's transition to the wettest game of the week. I guess I should qualify that because there were a lot of lightning delays, but I don't know how much moisture there was everywhere. But West Georgia, in a great Gulf South Conference game, beats Delta State 27-26. And, Justin, in the notes that we talked about, you said it was a sloppy game in sloppy conditions.
Yeah, it was. I thought from the beginning it was one of the better games in the Gulf South this week, and between 2 really good teams that I'm anxious to see how they play out throughout the season. So, turn the game on. It's pretty much a driving rainstorm for most of it. It was played at West Georgia, which is grass, and like I said, for the most part, it was just a wet, sloppy mess game out there. Both teams executed for the most part, given the conditions. It was tied early. West Georgia got up 2 scores to make it 17-6 at halftime. And then Delta State comes back and ties the game. And then they get a pick 6 score, miss the PAT, and now they're up 6 with under 5 to play in the fourth quarter. And then West Georgia drives 90 yards, 12 plays to score, kick the PAT, and win. As time expired, but it was just a wet game that it really brought, I thought, the best out in both of those teams because it was really adverse conditions. Harrison Frost was 29 of 50 for 292 yards, 2 interceptions, 2 touchdowns. An interesting note, though, when you looked at the stats, was 69 of West Georgia's 102 run yards came on the last 2 drives of the ball game. So really weren't able to get much going in terms of the run game first 3.5 quarters, and then able to kind of get it going there in the fourth quarter to seal the game and made the extra point to win it. But overall, great game. I thought it lived up to kind of what I thought it was going to be given the conditions. I'm excited because I think that West Georgia is setting themselves up nicely in conference play here early with how they've played. But Delta State, this is just a road bump. In their season so far, I'm not too concerned about them. But I do think that they're both going to be tough opponents in the Gulf South for the rest of the season.
It's pretty amazing. You've got 4 out of 8 teams are 3-0 going into the first week of conference play. I know that actually was a conference game, but first week of conference play coming up, and I think that's this weekend. You've got 4 teams that are sitting at 3-0, and also it's pretty interesting because West Georgia and Delta State play again in the last week of the season. Now that won't be a conference game because it's a makeup date basically that they didn't have other opponents. They're playing again in the last week of the season. So you got to be looking at that, Justin, thinking, boy, by the time we get to the end of the season, that's going to have some major implications on it won't be a conference game, but it should have major implications on regional rankings.
It will for sure. Yeah. every game from here on out is going to be important. And like you said, 3 teams. There's going to be a 1-loss Gulf South team, possibly a 2-loss Gulf South team making a bid for a playoff spot come the end of the season. Mm-hmm. So it's definitely not 1 loss isn't going to doom your season, but you lose 2 games in the Gulf South, it's going to be tough to hopefully get a playoff spot. But 3 teams undefeated right now. It's living up to the hype, I think.
Maybe West Florida will stop slacking and actually win a Gulf South Conference championship for once.
Hey! I want to mention something here because we haven't really talked about another game that also has implications for the playoffs, and that was Valdosta and Albany, because Albany lost to Valdosta 21-7.
Yeah,
but that's probably like the best team in the SIAC. So if they falter, then they might be probably a lower seed when you're looking at the Valdostas of the world. And now you're talking about West Georgia, Delta State. I mean, there's a chance that, the Gulf South gets 3 to 4 teams in just because they're winning the out-of-conference games, including teams that are probably top of their leagues.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Chris. I think it's been a couple of years since the SIAC had a playoff team. And it's really been the GSC and even the SAC a couple times that have kind of been able to take advantage of that. Last year, or 2019, the SAC had 3 teams in, which is unusual. I think it was the year before the GSC had 4 teams in. So, it is a big factor, and those out-of-conference games mean a lot when we get into regional rankings.
Hey, Justin, do you think that either West Georgia or Delta could challenge a Valdosta or West Florida going forward, based on what you've seen from them so far?
You say that one more time, Devin. I'm sorry.
Do you think West Georgia or Delta could possibly beat West Florida later in the year, or Valdosta, and maybe steal a conference title? Or how do you think that's going to work itself out?
It's hard to say right now. I think they can. I think they're not going to be easy games for Valdosta or West Florida at this point. I think they're going to be tough games. I was able to watch the Valdosta Albany State game. It started late. They had some lightning and weather delays down there in Valdosta. The game was played in Valdosta, and it was 7-3 at the half. And the first couple weeks, Valdosta State's offense really was clicking and was putting up high points, lots of yards. And in Albany State, right down the road, it's a big game for them. It's a pretty big rivalry game. So they kind of got their best shot, I thought, from Albany State. And, it was 7-3 at the half, and you're sitting there saying, wow, this thing isn't over. And it's, Valdosta ended up getting another touchdown about midway through the third quarter to make it 14-3, and then tacked one on in the fourth. So it was 21-3 final, but it was still, to me, going into the half, it's definitely a tight game. So I think that if nothing else, it showed that the Valdosta States and even West Florida being tied at the half is they're not, yes, they're very good, but they're not unbeatable, and I think West Georgia's, I've watched bits and parts of all 3 games so far, and they're getting better every time you see them. And I would say the same thing for Delta State. It's a shame one of those teams had to lose last night, because I think they're both really good teams. And each week you watch those teams, and they're getting better and better and better. And I think those top, to me, the West Floridas, the Valdostas, the West Georgias, the Deltas, they're getting better every week. And so it's going to be a shootout, I think, as the Gulf South goes come the end of the season. Last couple weeks of the season, I think, are going to have some huge playoff implications.
All right, man. I had pulled up this comment earlier from Jonathan Perry, and he said he played at Fayetteville State. He's an HBCU guy at heart. His son plays at Notre Dame College. But do you guys see any HBCUs this year being a threat to the playoffs, which makes me want to transition to Chris and Bowie State? 27.
Yeah, this is Chris' question right here.
Yeah, that's right, buddy. It's a 27-10 win over New Haven. Chris, tell us about the game. Tell us about the win by Bowie.
So Bowie State kind of struggled on offense for much of this game, and it was really their defense that showed, and also special teams. The defense and the offense both scored an equal amount of touchdowns in this game. And that was because the punter kept putting New Haven in really, really bad field position. They started like 3 of their series within their own 5. and then the Bowie defense just wreaked havoc, and they were so physical on a New Haven team that's not known to be physical. And so, the interception and 2 fumbles deep in their own territory that translated into Bowie points, into 21 Bowie points, is what really made the difference in this game, because the offenses weren't really there. And I just want to mention that, when we talk about an HBCU that can make a little bit of noise in the playoffs, I mean, Bowie is really the best shot because they have the championship caliber defense to do it. And there's a real question mark on the offense. But even if you look to 2019 when they played Carson Newman and an option offense that they don't really see, they only allowed Carson Newman 17 points. And so to win against the Saginaw Valley, to play tough against Delaware State, and now beat a New Haven that's supposed to be, in the top half of the Northeast 10, they're really the best shot. Fayetteville State, unfortunately, they can't win a game against a non-HBCU to save their lives right now, and they haven't for many years. And so, no, they're not a threat to win anything in the playoffs this year. Surprisingly, Chowan is probably the next best team to really look at, who's 3-0 and has a quarterback that threw for 7 touchdowns this past week against Witt against a new team in Erskine. But again, they also won 3 out-of-conference games to the SAC, 3 SAC teams, well, 2 SAC teams and 1 that's going to be in the SAC soon. But no, Fayetteville State is not the threat here. The South is too soft anyway. So, golly.
Whoa.
Bowie State's going to be there.
Some
in the
shade in
playoffs.
here.
I would fully expect Bowie State to be there. They've really been building something pretty special there, and they've actually fared really well in the playoffs. You mentioned the game against Carson Newman. They also did well recently against West Alabama and Delta State in recent playoff games. So they're really building their profile. They're really getting experience, getting out of conference, and they're fearless. Chris, don't you think they're fearless? I mean, they'll play anybody.
Oh yeah, they if they had an open date week 1, they would have played Grand Valley. Absolutely,
they would have played Grand Valley.
They would have played, and I think it would have been a really good game. So yeah, those guys are fearless. They play anybody, anywhere. They've had trouble scheduling games in out of conference. There are just teams that don't want to play them week 1, but those guys they'll do it. They'll play anybody. So they're great. They're a fun bunch to watch. They really are.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, man.
If West Florida ends up, let's say they have 1 blemish in conference of Valdosta or somebody like that, maybe they end up matching up with Bowie. Wouldn't that be kind of interesting, Chris?
I think it would. And the interesting thing is, where do they play? Because if somebody goes to Bowie to play, that's when Bowie typically plays their best football. They are truly a home field advantage team. They played very well with hosting Delta State in the playoffs. They won West Alabama at home. Saginaw Valley was at home. So they really play their, regardless of the season, they play their best ball at home. And gotcha. And I think that, our advantage is going to be that if they can get into the playoffs at a 4 seed or higher.
Yep.
All right. Let's move on, man. There were 2 more games that I wanted to talk about that involved, or at least mentioned that involved ranked team. Shepherd beat IUP 37-21. I think most of us thought that would happen. I don't really find it newsworthy. So I'd like to skip and talk about one that I think is much more newsworthy. And that is a game that was a very evenly played game. Tiffin beat Indianapolis 20-17. They threw a touchdown pass to take the lead about midway through the 4th quarter, in spite of losing Nick Watson to injury. Having said that, they barely had 200 yards of offense and found a way to win. And Chris Reisert is the coach there, and he has a phenomenal record since he has taken over at Tiffin. It seems to have them headed in the right direction.
Yeah. It's kind of funny. Brandon, you and I talked about him earlier in the year when we were kind of talking about who's the top 25 squads in the country. And he's 18-2 right now as the head coach. in his basically two years and change that he's been at the helm. Interesting kind of backstory with him, guys, is that back when I was, much more involved with the NAIA, 2007, Chris Ricer, the head coach of Tiffin, was actually the National Player of the Year quarterback at Ohio Dominican, and was a really fantastic quarterback. I think he threw for right around 14,000 career yards when they were still an NAIA program. And I remember it very well because I was following the University of Sioux Falls, and they had a guy named Chad Cavender, who one of the other publications named him the National Player of the Year. So we had quite a bit of a spirited debate about that topic years ago, 2007, not to date myself or anything. But he was an outstanding quarterback. And to see his name, kind of show up now and resurface now in D2 here. He was the head or the OC at Ohio Dominican. Then obviously he's been the head coach at Tiffin and is really doing some nice things with that program. And I think getting his quarterback, back and healthy is kind of a real key thing for them because he's got Nick Watson's 10,000 yard career passer, can run the football as well. They're in a good spot to be a playoff team if they can just kind of not find any potholes here, but due to injury.
Very good. Well, I think we've gone 45 minutes talking about what happened. And now it's time to show everybody how inept we are at picking winners and losers in the pick 'em. Hold on, let me bring that up, guys.
Does Chris have his L? You got your L again, Chris?
I have a different letter today.
Oh, great. Is it asked for all of our grades? All right, let me pull that up. Hold on, man. Go ahead. Looks like I'm having a little technical difficulties
While
on
you're
my
getting
end.
that pulled up, Brandon, I will say the one HBCU in the MIAA, Lincoln, will not be making the playoffs. I will say that.
I think they avoided 2 70-point losses in a row by canceling the
Northwest game.
The game against Northwest.
I wanted to see Cats by 90. I wanted the hashtag to be true for once.
Let me pull this up, guys.
By the way, Sonny, if you're still on, I saw your comment. West Alabama just scored again, so it's actually 87-0.
Also,
I was tracking the score on that for about 4 minutes, and I think in the first quarter it was already a runaway. That team they played had no business being out there.
Oh, Chris, you did okay this week.
Yeah. Not bad if everybody look. Sorry, they might be too small for some people, but Chris, the only loss was the Angelo game, the only incorrect pick for you. It looks like Chris, Matt, and I did the best. Me finally asserting my dominance as I should. Chuck had two wrong, Devin with 2 wrong, and Justin. Oh, Justin, come on, man.
Exactly.
Oh, man, he can outcoach any of us, but can't bet, apparently, or pick winners and losers. So.
It gets me in trouble every time.
It's
Because
amazing.
how I think it should be is it never is. I need to go against what I think, and I'll be okay.
Let's see if we can get you to 500 this week, Justin.
All
Appreciate that. We're going to try it.
So here's what the plan is for the rest of today's show. We're going to do the pick'em, and then I'm going to try to go back and field the questions that we've kind of ignored, and we'll always try to do that every week as best we can. So let's start with one of our games this week. Bentley at American International, both 3-0, will probably decide the winner of the Northeast 10, and I will go first this time, and I will take Bentley. Chuck, who will you pick?
I see this as a toss-up. I've seen both teams play, and they're pretty even. I'm going to go Bentley.
Okay. And Chris?
Here's that point in time where we talk about fantasy football and have fantasy football at stake here. Bentley
It
is
is
my answer.
7:15. Here we are.
All right.
It's a matter of time.
All right. And Justin?
I'm going to take Bentley.
Okay. Well, geez. Matt Wawicki.
this is one of the few things where I think Chuck is smarter than I am. So I'm going to go ahead and follow his lead. Chuck, no response from that at all. You just kicked the cat. I will I'm following Chuck's lead. I'm taking Bentley.
I think the cat kicks Chuck. I think that's the real power structure in that house.
Chuck, is your cat gone camera shy? What happened all of a sudden?
No, I locked him out tonight.
1 week. It's like a 1 week wonder. Okay.
So, as soon as Chuck says he locked the cat out, everybody stops watching and goes away.
Yes, exactly.
Chuck's cat on Twitter just said, "Let me in."
If my pick'em record gets bad enough, I will just defer my picks to them. We'll figure out a way to bait them into doing the picks.
Put 2 kitty treats out, and whichever one he picks.
I've already decided they're picking Mars Hill games for me from now on, because I can never get those right.
Awesome. So Devin, I know that you're worried about the Baltimore Ravens scoring on the Chiefs right now, but
they did not. Lamar Jackson threw a pick. Good job, Tyrann Mathieu, second of the day. Anyways, I'm taking American International. I'm going to go different. I got to make some catch up in the polls and the pick'ems. I'm going to go a little opposite. I think Chuck said there was a kind of a toss-up game, so I'm going to go against the grain against you guys and go American International.
All right. Truman State at Tiffin is a game I find interesting, number one, because I grew up around Truman State. Number two, because it's between 2 different conferences, and they kind of have a scheduling alliance, or they do have a scheduling alliance. And both teams are 3-0. Chuck, we'll start with you.
I'm going to go Truman.
Okay, Ferg, what about you?
With the rushing attack of Truman, I'm going with them as well.
Okay, Justin. I mean, don't sweat it. There are 80 games every week. I mean, we can't be perfect picking 80 games.
We will shame you though. Yes.
Oh, there's no doubt, and you should. I'm going to take Tiffin at home.
Okay. All right.
I'm going to go ahead and hope that Tiffin's got their quarterback returning, and I like them a lot if that's the case. So I'm going to take Tiffin. So if they don't play the quarterback, I get to have the other one. Isn't that how that works, Brandon?
Absolutely. All right, Devin, your turn.
I'm going to go Tiffin as well at home. I think the quarterback's going to be back this week, and I'll just take Tiffin.
Okay. Well, and I can't pick against what was relatively my hometown team. I will go with Truman State. The game
Top
of the
row
year.
Versus bottom row.
The game of the year in the GAC, Ouachita Baptist 3-0 at Harding 2-1. And Chris, we're going to start with you on this one.
This is a tough one. I'm going to go for the upset here. I'm going to go with Harding.
Okay. Justin.
Ouachita.
Okay. Matt Witwicky.
I'm going to go with the flex bone attack of Harding, and I think they're a little bit better than their week 2 setback suggests. So I like them in this one.
Okay. Devin Alberson.
I'm going to go with – I'm just going to roll with the home team here as well, Harding. I think that triple option is hard to stop. Old school in this one. Give me Harding.
Okay. I'm going to go with Harding as well. And Chuck, you'll be the last pick.
I'm going to go with Ouachita.
Okay. Awesome.
Gosh, the message boards are going to have our heads. All of ours.
It's all
GAC
good.
is going to be really interesting to watch in the next couple weeks.
Well, we will know a lot more in 1 week. Or no, I guess we could know it could ultimately almost be decided, or it could be something that comes down to the wire. This is a game, I think I know who everybody's going to pick, but it's a very interesting game to me, so that's why I chose it as one of the games. Colorado Mines is 3-0. They're playing at West Texas A&M. One of the most interesting non-conference games this year. Justin, we'll start with you.
Ooh. Colorado Mines.
Yeah. Matt?
I have a little trepidation taking. I'm going to take Mines. I think they're getting great quarterback play. Very good offense. I think they're pretty untested right now in terms of what their schedules look like. So I do have a little bit of a fear of them playing a squad that's going to be pretty physical. But I am going to take Mines, yeah.
Okay. Very good. And Devin.
I gotta take the Ore Diggers.
Okay.
I think the Mines is gonna win this game.
All right.
Devin's got a dog in the back now.
Yep. Say hi, bro.
There's all kinds of animals on this show.
That's right. Everybody loves animals. It's amazing how they just have instant positive reactions. So.
He gets in the shot and then yawns. Riveting television we have here.
She just woke up from a tiring nap. All right, she's tired.
Yes.
All right, so
wondering why you have a chain on at the moment, but yes.
That's his pick'em chain, which he
was
will.
That what it is? Okay. I thought it was a turnover chain because the Chiefs couldn't get any stops.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong.
All right, I will go. I'm going to go with Colorado Mines as well. I really wanted to pick West Texas, but I would be confident in that pick.
Right? I'll throw it out. I'll go West Texas.
Chuck, I love you. You're a good dude.
I think Mines is probably the better team, but what
it is a home game. Texas. It is a home game for West Texas. So, and then Chris.
Unfortunately, I got my degree from West Texas, but I ain't picking them. I'm going with Mines. I'm going with Mines.
Traitor.
I know.
Right.
Second week in a row.
All right, and we now have Ohio Dominican and Indianapolis. Both teams 2-1. I thought maybe that would be an evenly matched game. Who wants to go first on that one? Devin thought so little of that selection of my selection as this one of the games he left. So Let me see if he's back. Hold on. All right, good. He's back. All right. Ohio Dominican, Indianapolis. Let's start with.
I'll go first.
Okay.
Because I watched Ohio Dominican play, 2 weeks ago, and I'm a little nervous about picking them. I'm going to go with Indianapolis in this game.
Okay. Then Justin, you will go next.
Indianapolis.
Okay. All right, Matt.
I think I've probably said a few times this year that I just don't have confidence that Indianapolis is as good as their rank has been. But I think that they're going to be good enough defensively to win this game. So I'll take them. Yep.
Okay, very good.
All right, I will also take UND. I liked what they did last week versus Tiffin. Making that a really close game. Tiffin kind of snuck away late there against them. So I think UND's going to be able to bounce back this week, get a big win. And sorry, my Wi-Fi is terrible tonight.
That's okay.
Get kicked off.
We both have the same provider, and if Spectrum would like to provide us with better service for some kind of consideration, we would do that because I have the equally bad service from Spectrum. So all right, and I went with Indy last week, and they let me down. I could have been 5-0 if not for Indy. I'm going to go with Indianapolis. Don't let me down, Greyhounds. All right, Chuck, you're last.
Yeah, I saw both these teams play a couple times in the spring. I think they're fairly evenly matched, but I think UND is just a little bit better, well-rounded, and they had a couple of big mistakes this past weekend, but I think they'll bounce back. I'm going to go UND.
All right, well that's it. I can't wait to show off our picking futility next week. And
are we not picking the West Florida and University of Fort Lauderdale game?
We can. We can. Who is the? Is it North American?
Fort Lauderdale battled really, really hard and lost a close one to Mississippi College, 63-0.
Well,
this past weekend,
it's Gulf South team. I mean, it's Gulf South team.
I'm disappointed we're not doing Northeastern State at Lincoln this week. That's a riveting MIAA game there.
Hey, in all seriousness,
can we pick an over/under on that one?
In all seriousness, when talking about the MIAA, Missouri Southern beat Central Oklahoma.
Yeah, the MIAA is weird because Moso lost to Northeastern, who's on a 25-game losing streak, and then came back and beat Central Oklahoma the next week. I don't understand at all how that's possible, but here we are.
All right.
Just wait till we get to CIAA with two teams that don't have any wins. That's going to be interesting to pick.
There we go. Yeah.
All right. Looking through the questions, guys, I saw some. All right. Here was the first one. So, do you guys think anybody can slow down the Argonauts' offense this season? Seems like they have just picked right up where they left off in 2019.
Yep.
Does anybody think they can be slowed down? Who can slow them down?
Yeah.
Themselves.
Look, things are always different when you get into conference play. It's always different. And they've been so impressive, but I mean, conference play is just a different animal. They still have to get through Valdosta State. They have to get through West Georgia. They have to get through West Alabama. Is one of those teams going to beat them? I don't know yet. We have to look at those week to week, but I have a lot of confidence that there's teams in there that are going to give West Florida a really, really good fight.
All right.
Justin, what are your thoughts there?
I would agree. I agree with Chuck, but if they lose it, if their offense doesn't show up, it's on them. I mean, I think they're that good offensively. I think Austin Reed has such a good grasp on the offense.
Yep.
They're on a really good place right now, and they're all on the same page. So I think if they lose, it's going to be on them. But I do agree with Chuck. I think conference play they tend to have a good beat on who they are, so that there'll be some fights. There's no doubt, but if they lose, it's on them, I think.
Justin, when I watch them, I think of if they're going to lose in a firefight, because I'm not convinced that their defense is the type that you're going to see consistently winning national titles. I mean, when you take a look, Mankato, put 40 on them, in 19. I mean, you can make a case that Ferris kind of fumbled their game away in the semis, 2 years ago, and I'm just not real sure that defense is going to be strong enough to put them in a spot where I think Reed's going to have to really be a star in all those big games.
And I think you saw that against McNeese State week 1. I mean, their defense isn't going to win them ball games, but their offense will. Their offense,
right. Oh, yeah.
They're high powered now. I mean, they're as good as I've seen in a long time. So defensively, their goal, I think, is to get one or two turnovers a half and let the offense do the work.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, let's look at this one. How about we already just looked at that one? There we go. Shepherd put up a solid showing versus IUP. Are they a top 5 team?
Man, it's hard to beat IUP by more than 2 touchdowns on their own field. That doesn't happen very often. And this is a good IUP team. And Brandon, I know you wanted to just gloss over this because you probably just wanted to throw shade at Super Region 1.
No, no, not at all. It's because I knew Shepherd was going to win. I feel like they're different than the other teams right now.
It was a good game for message board fodder because those two fan bases like to go back and forth a little bit because there's some history even going back to when Shepherd was in the Wiviac, for those of us old enough to remember that. That was an awesome win. It was a close 10-6 game, defensive battle at the half, and then Shepherd came out and Tyson Bagent did Tyson Bagent things. We talk about Austin Reed as the favorite for the Harlan Hill so far, and I totally agree with that. But Tyson Bagent is just amazing. He had another monster day, 468 yards, 4 touchdowns, and Shepherd scored 4 touchdowns on their first 4 possessions of the second half to win going away. So that's a hard thing to do at IUP. But we have to remember it is a crossover game, so that doesn't count in the conference standings to get Shepherd or IUP into the PSAC championship game. And it's a factor as a tiebreaker, but it's not part of the primary criteria. So it is a crossover game. So there's still a lot of things that can happen in the PSAC. But that was a big win for them. And for Bradley, who asked about Super Region 1, I'll just touch on that real quick. Shepherd and Notre Dame are the favorites so far. Best teams I'm seeing coming out of Super Region 1. Tiffin is a tough team. We have to remember that they're in that region now as well.
Right.
So they're a really good football team. And I think a lot still depends on what happens in the Northeast 10. I think that they're going to have a contender. Just don't know yet who it's going to end up being. But there's some really good football teams being on display in the Northeast 10 this year too. So, but in short, Shepherd and Notre Dame are the favorites right now.
Can I just mention that Shepherd seems to have like several people that were really good at other PSAC schools that transferred to Shepherd to play on offense. So I mean, they're almost like a PSEC All-Stars right now. So
Well, I don't feel sorry. I don't feel sorry for them at all because I saw a tweet this week, and I did not know this, that Trent Cannon had started out at Shepherd.
yes,
Yeah,
he did.
I didn't know that. So they lost an NFL running back. So it's about time maybe they got some luck. Something came their way.
Yeah.
All right. Let's move on. Devin, you'll be the one to answer this. Thoughts on UNK's last-minute win against Washburn? Can UNK challenge Northwest in the MIAA?
So, yeah, I was watching that game side by side with the Northwest Central Missouri game is on at the same time. And the UNK Washburn game was much more exciting because it was a close game, actually. Just kind of back and forth. I'm really impressed with UNK and their offense. TJ Davis is like my new crush in the MIAA. The kid's so much fun to watch. He's kind of like what Lamar Jackson was at Louisville, where he would just take off and run, and then no one can catch him or get a good hit on him at all. UNK, their 4 scoring drives, they went 14 plays, 78 yards, 6 plays, 99 yards, 7 plays, 73 yards, and 12 plays, 65 yards. Take a lead with a minute left to go in the game to win that game at home versus Washburn. So back-to-back weeks with big wins over Washburn and Pitt State. That's what you want as UNK to kind of show that you belong in the top of the MIAA. And can they beat Northwest? They could absolutely beat Northwest. They beat them 2 years ago. And they could absolutely do it again. It's going to be at Maryville for, I think, Northwest's homecoming game. So it should be a really fun atmosphere. I'm going to try to go up to that game. Should be a lot of fun. Because Nebraska Kearney, there's a tough team to play because they use that spread running style. It's not easy to plan for in just a week's time to adjust for TJ Davis's speed and ability in the backfield. But there's any team that can shut it down, it would be Northwest. And Rich Wright, you've seen what he can do in the past against option-like teams and really shut down their offenses. So I think Nebraska Kearney has the best chance of beating Northwest right now if Northwest offense is what I think it's going to be going forward. But also their defense is really physical, and they're going to hit you in the mouth. And everyone has a game plan to hit in the mouth. That's what Nebraska Kearney kind of goes into each and every week when they play teams. So I'm really excited to see what they do. And it's really good for them to get top of the conference. When they joined the MIAA, they went winless the first year, maybe 2. So it's good for them to kind of get adjusted to that, and showing out in the MIAA is really great for the Lopers up there.
Right. And this is one I'm going to take, guys. It's too bad that the Wisconsin D3 state schools don't come clean and go D2. They would do just fine in D2. They have as many kids or money than most of the D2 teams, and they can play. This is absolutely the truth. There is a law in Wisconsin that prohibits scholarships for football for anybody but the University of Wisconsin.
Right.
Yep.
And it's, it's obviously benefited Wisconsin with so many national championships that I understand why they keep doing it. But I obviously understand the sarcasm. And I think anytime that they can feel justified in denying financial assistance for football players, for student athletes, for anybody, over the sake of trying to protect a Division I program that's never going to win a national championship, I think they're making the wrong choice. But yeah, if you look at the academic profile, enrollment, and endowment, things like that, they very much belong as like many of the state schools. It's very, very similar, and they would be much better fit, most of them, in Division II rather than as a member of Division III. But they have great D3 history, and D3 football is great too. So it's not an indictment of that. It's just the fact that they probably belong with other like state schools.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay.
You're violating the laws of economics because you have a demand there for that. I mean,
Right.
come on.
Right.
Yeah, for sure.
Especially with, ultimately I'm not the one, paying the taxes in Wisconsin and defending their budgetary expenditures. But, with the rising cost of education, if we could get, help a kid with $10,000 a year, it makes a big difference in how he starts his life, rather than have to borrow all that. So, and let's see, I think that will be all the questions, guys.
There's one in here that I'd like to take.
Okay, great.
It's a CIAA question.
Go ahead.
It's show on a playoff team this year. And it's kind of hard. They've got a new head coach, Mark Hall, who used to be the offensive coordinator. That 3-0 start is against some, pretty okay competition to start out. They've got a pretty tough road ahead of them in the CIAA North because Virginia State's going to be a tough out. Virginia Union's going to be a tough out. And Winston State typically plays good defense. If they can put together an offense to keep up, they've slowed Chowan down in the past. And so, and then you've got the bully in Bowie State. So if they can go 3-1 in those games, then yes, they could probably sneak in as probably a 7 seed. I think the problem is with the CIAA, they only play 10 games, and you kind of need that 11th game to keep up with the SAC and the Gulf South. So it's very possible if they run the table, yes, they're in. If they have one loss, it's still possible because of the out-of-conference play. But more than one loss ain't going to cut it in Super Region 2 this year. I just don't see it.
And they have those 2 out-of-conference wins over the SAC that, if they're in contention, that's going to be a big asset for them. If they're in play at the end. And I'm going to take one real quick before we end it. Brandon, somebody asked about Frostburg State. I watched that entire game last Thursday when they were playing at home against University of Charleston. That was the preseason number 2 and the preseason number 3 in the Mountain East Conference. Really interesting game. It's a tight battle the whole way. It kind of looked like Charleston was going to get out of there with the road victory, and then Frostburg gets a score late. I think it was in the final minute to go ahead, and then Charleston was able to get into overtime with a 53-yard field goal on the last play of the game, which was pretty incredible. And then Frostburg was able to do it in overtime. So, at this point, you have to look at them as the top challenger to Notre Dame's supremacy in the Mountain East Conference. And the thing that's really interesting about Frostburg, because we actually just talked a little bit about Division II and Division III, Frostburg was a Division III team until just a couple of years ago.
Right.
So, it's pretty incredible that, this early on in their transition to Division II, we're already talking about them as a threat to win a conference championship.
All right.
Also, one last thing before we head out tonight. Shout out to Greg Zerline, former Nebraska, Omaha, and Missouri Western kicker. They hit a 56-yard field goal. Helped the Cowboys win a game. They're the buzzer, but still good for him to get a 56-yard field goal. D2 player win a game in the NFL level is pretty cool there. Had a rough week 1, but Greg the Lake still kicking there in the NFL with a big game winner. So I want to give him a shout out.
He's a super good dude too. He's a really, really nice kid. So he's such a nice guy. I get excited, or I get nervous for him every time he kicks. It drives me insane. It's like a nephew or a kid. So all right,
he bombed that one today though.
Yes, he did. It was great. So all right, staff, if you would stick around after the credits roll, I want to talk about the show, and we'll say our proper goodbyes that way. But as we leave, I would like we're going to run a list of people who financially supported D2Football.com. Obviously, have helped us survive COVID and thrive and prosper and add things. And if you would like to help support us, there will be a link in the description. But until then, we'll see you next week. And thanks for joining us, and have a good week.